In the unforgiving Montana Territory of 1861, a woman bound by an iron collar finds an unlikely ally in a legendary mountain man chained for a decade by the same cruel master. When they escape into the wilderness, pursued by ruthless ranchers and harsh elements, will Eleanor and William find freedom together or die trying? The iron collar bit into Eleanor Wright's skin as she hauled water from the well on Harrison Caldwell's Montana ranch. 1861 had brought the harshest winter folks could remember, but the cold outside hurt less than the life inside. Eleanor paused, watching her breath cloud in the frozen air. The mountains beyond the ranch called to her, so close yet impossible to reach. "Move faster, girl," Caldwell shouted from the porch, his voice cutting through the morning stillness. "Those animals need water before I need breakfast." Eleanor gripped the buckets tighter, muscles straining. 3 years she'd been here, bought when Caldwell's cattle business grew too big for him to manage alone. The law called her his property, though she'd been born free in Pennsylvania before being taken west by traders. The ranch spread across a valley beneath the towering Bitterroot Mountains, 5 buildings surrounded by split-rail fences. Cattle dotted the distant pastures like small brown specks against the snow. It might have been beautiful if it wasn't her prison. Inside the kitchen, she stoked the cook stove while Mrs. Hernandez, the cook who came up from Mexico years ago, kneaded dough. "He's in a mood today," the older woman whispered. "Marshall's coming from Helena next week. Something about that wild man they've been hunting in the mountains." Eleanor sliced bacon, the fat sizzling when it hit the pan. "The one they say's been stealing cattle? 10 years he's been up there, Mrs." Hernandez nodded, glancing toward the doorway to ensure they weren't overheard. "Some say he was somebody important before a doctor, maybe. Others think he's just crazy, living in caves and talking to animals." Shouts erupted from the direction of the barn, followed by the crack of a rifle firing into the air. Eleanor dropped the knife, rushing to the window. 4 of Caldwell's men dragged someone toward the barn. A man, bigger than any she'd ever seen, fighting despite chains on his wrists and ankles. "Got him! Finally got the mountain devil!" Caldwell's foreman yelled. Mrs. Hernandez crossed herself. "Santa Maria!" Eleanor couldn't look away. The captured man's clothes were animal hides stitched together. His hair and beard had grown wild, but his eyes, even from a distance, burned with intelligence, not madness. "Back to work," Mrs. Hernandez hissed, pulling Eleanor from the window. "Their business ain't ours." But later, after serving Caldwell and his men breakfast, Eleanor heard her name called. "The prisoner needs tending," Caldwell said, wiping grease from his mouth with a sleeve. "Can't have him dying before the marshal sees him. You'll feed him, clean him if you can." "Me, see ya?" "The men won't go near him after what he did to Jones's arm." Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Besides, you know what happens to slaves who don't follow orders." Eleanor's back still carried scars from the last time she'd hesitated. She nodded, took the keys to the prisoner's chains, and walked slowly toward the barn, wondering what kind of monster waited inside. The barn door creaked open. Weak winter light filtered through cracks in the walls. The prisoner sat against a post, head down, chains securing him to the thick wood. Blood dried on his temple where he'd been struck. "I brought water," Eleanor said softly, keeping her distance. The man's head lifted. His eyes, clear blue like mountain lakes, studied her. Then they dropped to the iron collar around her neck. "Seems we're both captives," he said, his voice rough but educated. Nothing like she expected from a wild mountain man. Eleanor stepped closer, offering the ladle of water. "I'm supposed to clean your wounds." "My name is William Hargrove," he said instead of drinking. "Remember that. They'll try to make me nameless. But I was someone before this place, just as you were." Eleanor glanced over her shoulder, heart racing. No one had spoken to her as a person in years. "Drink," she whispered. "Please. They'll beat me if you don't." William drank slowly, eyes never leaving her face. "The mountains will be covered in snow soon," he said. "When it melts, I'll be gone from here. You're chained to a post with armed men outside." A smile crept through his tangled beard. "And you wear their collar, yet your mind remains free. That's where escape begins." For the first time in 3 years, something dangerous bloomed in Eleanor's chest. Hope. Frost flowers bloomed across the barn window as Eleanor scraped dried blood from William's forehead. A week had passed since his capture. Outside, The guards huddled around a fire, passing a bottle to keep warm in the deepening cold. "They say you stole cattle," Eleanor said, dipping her rag in a bucket of melting snow. William winced as she cleaned a deep cut along his cheekbone. "I took what I needed to survive after Caldwell burned my cabin and clinic." "You really were a doctor?" "In Boston then, Street Lewis." William's chains rattled as he shifted position. "I came west in 1850. 3 to start fresh, bringing medicine to places without doctors. Built a life in these mountains before men like Caldwell arrived with papers claiming everything they saw." Eleanor glanced toward the door. "Mrs. Hernandez says Caldwell has the law on his side. Laws written by men like him. For men like him." William's eyes found her collar again. "Just as the laws that claim you as property were written by those who profit from your chains." Footsteps approached. Eleanor quickly moved away, pretending to clean the floor as the barn door swung open. Caldwell entered with his foreman, Frank Miller. "Marshals delayed by the storm," Caldwell announced, studying William with unconcealed hatred. "Might be spring before he reaches us." "Long time to feed a prisoner," Miller said, hand resting on his pistol. "Then we make him useful." Caldwell pointed to the tools hanging on the wall. "He's got strong hands. Have him repair tack and equipment. Double the chains first." After they left, Eleanor returned to William's side. "Why does he hate you so much?" "I treated Blackfeet children during a fever outbreak. Caldwell believes Indians should be cleared from these territories, not helped." William lowered his voice. "But there's more. His land claims the papers giving him this valley, I believe, they're forgeries. Before I was driven to the high country, I was gathering proof." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You could lose this place? We all could gain it back." William leaned closer. "There's a false panel in my cabin wall with documents. If someone found them, took them to the territorial office in Helena." "You're dreaming. Nobody escapes Caldwell." William's hand moved suddenly, catching her wrist. His palm held something small and metal. "A lockpick," he whispered. "Made it from a nail while they thought I was sleeping." "Take it." Eleanor hesitated, then slipped it into her pocket as voices approached outside. Miller entered with 3 men carrying extra chains. Behind them came Caldwell's son, Robert, 18 years old and already cruel like his father. "Step back from him," Robert ordered Eleanor, his hand gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. As the men secured additional chains to William's ankles, Robert's fingers traced the edge of Eleanor's collar. "Father says the mountain man spoke to you," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "What did he say?" "Nothing important," Eleanor answered, trying to pull away. "Fever talk mostly." Robert's grip tightened. "Liars get punished." Before Eleanor could respond, William's voice cut through the barn. "The girl knows nothing, but I know about the cattle you've been selling. From your father's herd and pocketing the money." Robert's face paled. He released Eleanor, turning to William with fury and fear. "You're lying." 3 steers last month, 2 before that. William's calm voice carried an unmistakable threat. "Does your father know his own son steals from him?" The first kick caught William in the ribs, the second in the face. As Robert's boot drew back a 3rd time, Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Stop! You'll kill him." Robert spun, striking Eleanor hard across the face. She fell, tasting blood. "Both of you remember your place," Robert snarled, straightening his coat. "Or there won't be enough left of either of you for the marshal to question." After the men left, Eleanor crawled to William's side. Blood trickled from his split lip. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, pressing her sleeve against his mouth. "He could have killed you." William's eyes met hers. "Because now you know." "Know what?" "That some things are worth the pain." His fingers brushed hers as he took the cloth. "And that we both have reasons to leave before spring." Outside, the mountain winds howled, promising more snow and bitter cold. But inside Eleanor's mind, plans began to form like spring shoots breaking through frozen ground. The small flame of Eleanor's lantern cast giant shadows against the barn walls as she crept inside, clutching a jar of honey-mixed herbs. The chained man jerked awake at her footsteps, eyes wild like a cornered wolf. "I brought something for the cuts," she whispered, staying beyond his reach. The chains rattled as he shifted. Moonlight from the high window, revealing deep wounds where metal had rubbed his skin raw. "Why help the mountain devil?" he asked, using Caldwell's mocking name. Eleanor dipped a clean rag into the mixture. Because nobody deserves to be treated like an animal. She held out the cloth, not moving closer. After studying her face, he slowly extended his arm. His fingers were long and once elegant, not a rancher's hands at all. As she dabbed the medicine on his wrists, he flinched but didn't pull away. "My name is Eleanor," she said, noticing a small scar shaped like a crescent moon on his palm. "Not girl or slave or whatever else they call me." 3 heartbeats passed before he answered. "William. William Hargrove." That name sparked something in her memory. "The doctor? Folks down in the valley still talk about you." The barn grew quieter as night deepened. William's breathing changed as the pain medicine took effect. "I came west in 1853, he finally said. "Built a cabin and clinic up near Serpent Creek before Caldwell showed up waving papers from some land office nobody'd heard of." Eleanor worked silently, cleaning dirt from wounds that had festered for days. "Why didn't you leave when they forced you out?" "My wife died on that mountain," William said so softly Eleanor barely heard. "Childbirth. No midwife for 50 miles. I couldn't save either of them." Something passed between them then, an understanding of loss that needed no words. William studied the iron collar around her neck. "Where did they take you from?" "Missouri. My master lost everything gambling, sold us all separately." Eleanor's hands stilled. "My daughter was 5. I don't know where she is now." Dawn light began creeping through cracks in the barn walls. Outside, Caldwell's men were saddling horses. Eleanor quickly gathered her supplies. "I'll return tonight." "Eleanor," William called as she reached the door. "That collar, I could remove it. I have tools hidden where they wouldn't search." Hope flared dangerous and bright. "Caldwell would kill us both." "Not if we weren't here." William's eyes held steady. "I've survived 10 years in mountains they're afraid to enter." That evening, Eleanor found only empty chains on the straw-covered floor. Panic gripped her until she spotted something tucked into a crack in the wooden post, a carefully folded paper. Inside was a detailed map marked with an X high in the mountains, and a single line written in a doctor's precise hand, "When you're ready." She hid the map inside her threadbare shoe, heart pounding with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years possibility. The meat storeroom door banged open as Caldwell stumbled in, face flushed with whiskey and rage. "Worthless!" he shouted, kicking over a barrel of salt pork. The rancid smell filled the small space as spoiled meat spilled across the floor. "Everything's spoiled." Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, knowing what came next. Winter had arrived early and fierce, howling outside like a hungry beast. Inside, an equally dangerous predator advanced on her. "3 winters I've fed you, clothed you," Caldwell snarled, grabbing her arm. "And this is how you repay me? Letting our food rot?" The first blow knocked her against the shelves. The second brought blood from her lip. The third never came. Caldwell collapsed into a drunken heap, cursing the escaped prisoner, the coming blizzard, and the failing ranch in equal measure. Eleanor touched her swollen face, something inside her finally snapping like ice breaking on a spring river. If not now, when? Midnight found her stealing through the ranch house, taking only what she absolutely needed: matches, a knife, dried beef, and Caldwell's smallest pair of boots. The map crinkled against her palm as she studied it one last time before tucking it inside her coat. The wind nearly knocked her flat when she slipped outside. Snow whipped sideways, already piling in drifts against the buildings. No one would follow tracks in this weather, but no one would survive long in it either. Eleanor pulled a woolen scarf over her face and pushed forward, using the distant shape of Cougar Peak to guide her. Each step sank her knee-deep in snow. Each breath froze in her lungs. After an hour, her stolen boots were soaked through, her toes numb blocks of ice. A howl cut through the storm, not wind, but wolves. Eleanor froze, peering into swirling whiteness. Yellow eyes reflected moonlight, circling closer. 1 wolf, then 3, then 5 emerged from the darkness, drawn by the scent of the dried meat in her pocket. Her fingers fumbled for the knife, knowing it would be useless against the pack. The largest wolf advanced, steam rising from its open jaws. Eleanor backed away until her shoulders hit the trunk of a pine tree. Trapped. The sound came suddenly, a sharp whistle cutting through the storm. The wolves' ears pricked up, their attention diverted to something behind her. A warning shot cracked overhead, sending them retreating into the darkness. "You picked the worst night in years to climb a mountain," said a voice as a figure materialized from the blizzard. William's beard was frosted with ice, but his eyes held warmth as he wrapped a fur around her shoulders. "How did you find me?" Eleanor's voice shook with cold. "I've been watching the ranch," William said, supporting her weight as her legs began to give out. Waiting, the storm intensified, swallowing them in white. Eleanor stumbled, then fell. The cold felt almost pleasant now, a dangerous sign. William's voice seemed to come from far away, urgent but fading. Strong arms lifted her as consciousness slipped away like water through fingers. Dreams and reality blurred the sensation of being carried. The smell of smoke, the painful return of feeling to frozen limbs. Eleanor woke disoriented in a small cabin, lined with books and dried plants, hanging in bundles from the ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. William sat at a rough-hewn table, grinding herbs in a mortar. "You've been asleep 2 days," he said without turning. "The storm's still raging." Eleanor's hand went to her throat, finding only bare skin where the collar had been. Following her gaze, William nodded toward the floor where the iron band lay broken in 2 pieces. "I removed it while you slept," he explained. "The skin underneath needs treatment." Eleanor wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and moved to the cabin's single window. Snow had drifted halfway up the glass. "They'll come looking when the weather clears." "They always do," William said, his voice carrying the weariness of a decade spent watching over his shoulder. "You'll be safer moving on when you're stronger." Eleanor turned from the window. "Is that what you think I am? Someone looking for protection?" "This isn't freedom." William gestured around the small cabin. "It's just a different kind of cage." "I made my choice," Eleanor said firmly. "I died a little every day in that house. At least here, I choose my own path forward." For the first time, William smiled, a rusty, unpracticed expression. "Then we'd better make sure you survive it." The crack of a twig made Eleanor freeze. She ducked behind a pine tree, basket of herbs clutched to her chest. Morning fog still hung in the valley below William's mountain cabin, where they'd spent the winter of 1862 hiding from Caldwell's men. "It's just a deer," William said, appearing beside her. His beard was trimmed now, and the wildness in his eyes had softened. He pointed to a doe and fawn drinking from a stream nearby. Eleanor's shoulders relaxed. "I keep thinking every sound is them coming for us." "We're safe here," William assured her, though his hand rested on the knife at his belt. "Caldwell thinks the winter killed us." Back at the cabin, Eleanor sorted the plants they'd gathered. Yarrow for wounds, willow bark for pain, and echinacea for fevers. William had taught her how each one helped the body heal. She'd learned quickly, her fingers nimble at preparing tinctures and poultices. "You've got a natural talent," William said, watching her work. "Better than most students I taught in Boston." A smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Hard to believe I was scrubbing floors just months ago." Their peaceful routine was broken 3 days later when a trapper named Oates stumbled to their door, his leg mangled in a bear trap. While William cleaned the wound, Eleanor prepared herbs to fight infection. "Word in the valley is Caldwell's offering $50 for information about a runaway slave woman and the mountain man," Oates said through gritted teeth. William's hands stilled. "What else have you heard?" "New cattle arriving next week. Big herd." Oates winced as William stitched his wound. "Caldwell's been boasting he'll burn out any squatters in the high country come spring." That night, while Oates slept by the fire, Eleanor and William whispered plans by candlelight. "We should move deeper into the mountains," William suggested. Eleanor shook her head. "Running only gives him power. We need allies." Over the following weeks, they ventured further from the cabin, treating ailments among the scattered homesteaders and native Blackfeet. Word spread of the healing pair in the mountains. Some paid with food or furs, others with friendship and loyalty. One evening, returning from helping a settler's wife deliver a baby, they found fresh tracks around their cabin. "Hunting boots. 4 men," William said, examining the mud. That night, they took turns keeping watch. When dawn broke, smoke rose from the valley. Caldwell's men burning out a family who'd sheltered them. "We've put them in danger," Eleanor whispered, tears in her eyes. A warning came from Running Elk, a Blackfeet chief whose grandson they'd saved from fever. "Yellow Hair Rancher offers gold for you both. My warriors saw his men in the lower passes yesterday." Eleanor packed their medicines while William gathered food. "If we leave now, The first shot splintered the window frame. Outside, Caldwell's voice carried up from the clearing. "Come out, doctor. Bring my property with you." 5 men stood in the yard, rifles raised. Through the broken window, Eleanor saw Caldwell himself, his face red with drink and hate. "The tunnel," William whispered, pulling up a trapdoor hidden under a bearskin rug. "It leads to the river." "I won't run anymore," Eleanor said, grabbing William's journal, where they'd recorded their medical discoveries. William gripped her shoulders. "Sometimes surviving is the bravest fight." As smoke began to fill the cabin, they descended into darkness. The underground passage was tight and damp, rocks scraping their backs as they crawled toward freedom. They emerged gasping by the riverbank, the roar of water mixing with distant shouts. Then, a crack of rifles. William pushed Eleanor down as bullets whistled overhead. "There!" Caldwell's voice rang out. They were surrounded. The first bullet kicked up dirt at Eleanor's feet. The second struck William's shoulder, spinning him around like a leaf in wind. He crumpled to the ground, blood soaking his buckskin shirt. "No!" Eleanor dropped beside him, pressing her hands over the wound. She glared up at Caldwell, who advanced with his smoking rifle. "Property damage," he smirked, nodding toward William, "and theft." His eyes fixed on Eleanor. Caldwell's men closed in, boots crushing the spring flowers. Eleanor reached for William's knife, her hands slippery with his blood. Before she could grasp it, an arrow whispered through the air and buried itself in the chest of the man nearest Caldwell. Then another, and another. Blackfeet warriors materialized from the trees, bows drawn. Caldwell fired wildly, hitting nothing. His remaining men scattered like quail, dragging their wounded boss into the forest. Chief Running Elk approached as Eleanor cradled William's head. "The mountain man saved my son. Now we save him." Strong hands lifted William onto a travois. Eleanor clutched their precious journal of healing plants as they hurried toward the Blackfeet camp, William's life leaking out with every step. Inside a warm lodge, Eleanor worked frantically, applying the very medicines William had taught her to use. Her fingers trembled as she cleaned the wound, finding the bullet had passed through muscle but missed his lungs. "You must sing the healing songs," an old Blackfeet woman told her, pressing a poultice of chewed herbs into Eleanor's hands. "I don't know them," Eleanor whispered, tears tracking clean lines down her dirty face. "Then sing what your heart knows," the woman replied. For 3 days, William burned with fever. Eleanor cooled his skin with damp cloths and dripped broth between his cracked lips. She slept in snatches, jerking awake at his every moan. On the 4th morning, William's eyes opened, clear and focused. "You're still here," he murmured. "Always," she answered, joy and exhaustion mingling in her voice. As William regained strength, Eleanor learned from the Blackfeet women, trading her medical knowledge for their plant wisdom. She recorded everything in the journal, drawing plants and writing their uses in careful letters. "Your medicines and our ways together make stronger healing," Running Elk's wife told her, showing Eleanor how to set broken bones with strips of wet rawhide that hardened like plaster. One evening, as William sat outside watching the sunset, Eleanor shared her decision. "I'm going to Helena when you're stronger." William's eyes widened. "Helena? The territorial capital? Why?" "Caldwell's land papers," she explained, sitting beside him. "The marks didn't match others I saw in his office. I think they're fake. Even if they are, the law doesn't listen to people like us," William argued. Eleanor touched the scar on her neck where the collar had been. The law might not listen to a runaway slave or a mountain hermit, but it might listen to a healer who saved white settlers' children. William studied her face, seeing the strength that had grown there. "You've changed." "We both have," she replied, taking his hand. "You taught me medicine. I'm teaching you to rejoin the world." Later that night, Running Elk and the tribal elders gathered them in the central lodge. The chief held out an intricately beaded medicine bag. "We make blood oath," he announced, cutting his palm with a small knife. "Your enemies are our enemies. Your healing is our healing." William and Eleanor each received the small ceremonial cut, their blood mixing with the chief's on a sacred stone. "Now we are family," Running Elk declared. "When you go to fight with words in the white man's big lodge, Blackfeet warriors will stand with you." Under a blanket of stars, Eleanor helped William walk the perimeter of the camp, rebuilding his strength. In the distance, a wolf howled a lonely sound that no longer frightened her. Do you think we can win? William asked, leaning against her. Eleanor looked toward the mountains where Caldwell still hunted them. I don't know. But I know we can't live free until we try. Eleanor's hands shook as she placed the yellowed papers on the judge's desk. The Helena courthouse smelled like tobacco and old books. Outside, a crowd gathered, whispering about the slave woman who dared challenge a powerful rancher. These marks shouldn't be here, Eleanor said, pointing to smudges on Caldwell's land papers. Her finger traced where ink had been changed. Numbers altered. The original boundaries were smaller. The judge, a gray-haired man named Hollister, squinted through spectacles. He didn't look at Eleanor at first, just the papers. People rarely looked slaves in the eye. And who taught you to read such documents, Miss Wright? He asked. I taught myself, Your Honor. In secret. At night, by candlelight. William stood nearby, his presence giving her strength. The scar on his shoulder was still pink from the bullet wound. 3 other settlers waited their turn to speak, all men who'd lost land to Caldwell's spreading empire. The courthouse door banged open. Everyone turned. Caldwell stormed in, face red with rage and whiskey. This is nonsense, he shouted. She's my property, speaking lies. Judge Hollister's gavel cracked against wood. Mr. Caldwell, control yourself or be removed. A thin man with a notebook, Mr. Peters from the land office, stepped forward. I've compared these papers with our records, Your Honor. The boundaries have indeed been altered after filing. And there's more. He laid out similar papers from Wyoming and Dakota territories. Same handwriting changes. Same pattern. Sweat beaded on Caldwell's forehead. He lunged toward Eleanor. You ungrateful. 2 deputies grabbed his arms. The territories have laws, Mr. Caldwell. Even out here, Judge Hollister said, voice suddenly hard. Laws about document forgery, laws about testimony. He glanced at Eleanor with new respect. And increasingly, laws about human bondage. The courtroom fell silent when the judge mentioned slavery. The war back east had changed things, but slowly, unevenly. I want all of Caldwell's holdings reviewed, the judge announced. Every acre, every claim. Eleanor felt something inside her chest release, a tightness she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Later, standing in the autumn sunshine, William asked, Will you testify against him for keeping you as a slave? Eleanor watched Caldwell being led to jail, iron cuffs on his wrists. For a moment, she imagined him wearing a collar that bit into his skin. No, she finally said. I want to build something, not destroy. Even him. William's eyebrows rose. That's mercy he doesn't deserve. It's not for him, Eleanor replied. It's for me. I won't let hate live in me any longer. On the stagecoach heading back to the valley, Eleanor spotted a family of former slaves working their own land. The mother looked up, saw Eleanor, and raised her hand in greeting, one free woman to another. What will you do with your share when Caldwell's land is divided? William asked. Eleanor smiled. The future opened before her like an unwritten page. Something that helps people heal, just like you taught me. The mountains rose in the distance, no longer a barrier but a backdrop to possibility. Fresh snow crunched under Eleanor's boots as she made her way to the schoolhouse that used to be Caldwell's main house. 1865 had brought the coldest winter anyone could remember. But inside, warmth greeted her both from the crackling stove and the children's smiles. Miss Wright, Miss Wright, little Emma Jones tugged at her skirt. I can read the whole first page now. Eleanor knelt to the child's level. Show me, after lessons, sweetheart. 12 students gathered around rough-hewn tables, children of settlers, former slaves, and even 2 Blackfeet children, whose families traded with the settlement. On the wall hung a hand-drawn map of nearby healing plants, labeled in Eleanor's careful writing. When the children began their reading practice, Eleanor moved to the window. From here she could see the clinic where William worked. Smoke curled from its chimney as people came and went, a trapper with a gashed leg, a woman near her time with her first child. The settlement had no official name yet. Some called it Wright's Valley, others New Hope. It spread across land that once belonged to Caldwell Ranch, now divided among 20 families who worked parts individually and other sections together. The door opened, bringing a blast of cold air, and William, snow dusted his beard, now neatly trimmed. The children called greetings, used to the doctor's visits. Mrs. Tanner's baby arrived, he announced. A boy, healthy and loud, Eleanor smiled. That's the third new baby this winter. Life persists, William said, warming his hands by the stove, even in the hardest seasons. Later, after the children left, they walked the path between school and clinic. The afternoon sun made the snow sparkle like scattered diamonds. Chief Running Elk sent a message, William said. His people are moving closer for spring hunting. He asks if you'll share your knowledge of fever remedies with their healers. Eleanor nodded. Of course. And we can learn from them too. They passed the community storehouse, built last autumn, and filled with enough supplies to last until spring. Eleanor remembered the hungry winters at Caldwell's ranch, how he'd eaten well while others starved. At the ridge overlooking the valley, they stopped. Below them, smoke rose from cabins scattered across the snow-covered land. People moved between buildings, carrying wood, tending animals, living freely. I received a letter from Helena, William said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. Judge Hollister asked if we would consider helping establish similar settlements elsewhere. There are other Caldwells out there. Eleanor looked at the mountains that had once seemed like prison walls. Now they felt like guardians. Caldwell is being released next month, William added, watching her face carefully. Eleanor took a deep breath. I know. Does that worry you? She considered the question. No. He has no power here anymore. The sun began to set, painting the snow pink and gold. Eleanor touched the small scar on her neck where the collar had been. Sometimes, waking from deep sleep, she still felt its phantom weight. We should start that herb garden we talked about when spring comes, she said. The children can help. William took her hand. His fingers were warm despite the cold air. Eleanor Wright, would you consider becoming Eleanor Hargrove? The question hung between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. Eleanor looked across the valley, where people once bound by different chains now built something new together. A community growing from shared scars and shared hopes. Yes, she said simply. As darkness settled over the mountains, they walked home together, two people who had found freedom not in escape but in connection, not in forgetting the past but in transforming it.